Do you see it yet? Do you see the same trick played on us over and over? Like a stage magician. Sometimes it's doves, sometimes it's cards, sometimes it's an endless rope of silk handkerchiefs. The props may vary, but the objective is the same: to fool you even when you think you're watching carefully. Online publication ZeroHedge carried a story recently headlined, "Doesn't fit MSM narrative. Latest Arctic ice data shows 26% larger than 2012. The piece referenced a post by climate hoax observer Tony Heller on X, Twitter, highlighting a BBC News article all the way back in 2007 predicting ice-free Arctic summers by 2013. As the Beeb had it, quote, "Latest modelling studies indicate northern polar waters could be ice-free in summers within just 5 to 6 years. Quote, "The BBC claim was baseless, quote, "designed to instill climate fears across the public, to ram through a radical degrowth climate agenda across the Western world." I'd have to agree, but then, as you know, I am a notorious conspiracy theorist. The latest data, I say again, shows Arctic ice 26% greater than it was in 2012. I've only been awake to the clumsy conjuring trick for a few years, but already I find the endless repetition exhausting. The setup and props keep changing, but the end result is always the same: more money and control for those managing the magician, less money and fewer rights for the rest of us. The climate crisis is just one hoax, but it's worked its magic for the insiders. Countries across Europe, Britain to the fore among them, have been deindustrialised, have stopped exploiting easily accessible and reliable energy sources in favour of ruinously expensive and hopelessly unreliable so-called renewables, wind turbines and solar panels. Once again, the insiders get rich by controlling energy generation and energy supply, while the plebs watch their domestic industries eviscerated while feeling the pinch of cold and poverty both. News that the BBC was complicit in pushing the lies necessary to the achievement of all this will make no difference. How could it? The job's done. In Britain, the coal industry is gone, oil and gas are in their death throes, and all around us spread the metastasising cancer growth of turbines and solar panels, products laden with toxins, dependent upon the environmentally destructive mining of rare earth metals and on the use of traditional energy for their manufacture. And still, the gullible listen to and believe the propaganda that makes human life and livestock herds to blame for putting the world at boiling point. As I say, exhausting to watch. The Daily Telegraph this week carried a story headlined, "FBI found evidence COVID was lab leak but was not allowed to brief President." Quote, "The FBI found evidence suggesting that COVID-19 was caused by a lab leak, but were not allowed to brief the President," it has been claimed. Jason Bannon, a doctor of microbiology and former senior scientist at the FBI, has dedicated more than a year of his life to discovering the origins of COVID. But despite being the only US National Intelligence Agency to conclude that a lab leak was likely, the FBI and Mr. Bannon were snubbed from a National Intelligence Council briefing with Joe Biden, it's been claimed. Mr. Biden had ordered an urgent investigation in May 2021 by US intelligence agencies and national laboratories to identify whether the virus had been transferred from an animal to a human or had escaped from a Chinese lab. One of the most popular theories at the time was that it had been transferred from a bat at a wet market in Wuhan, where the virus first emerged in 2019. The National Intelligence Council, a body of senior intelligence officers that organised the review, had concluded with low confidence that COVID-19 had been transmitted from an animal to a human, along with 4 intelligence agencies. This was then presented by Avril Haines, the Director of National Intelligence, and 2 of her senior analysts to President Biden and his top aides in August 2021. The FBI had not only concluded a lab leak was likely, but that it had moderate confidence in its assessment, more than any other agency, and had expected to make this case to the White House, but no officials from the agency were invited to do so. In his first interview, Mr. Bannon told the Wall Street Journal, being the only agency that assessed a lab origin was more likely, and the agency that expressed the highest level of confidence in its analysis of the source of the pandemic, we anticipated the FBI would be asked to attend the briefing. I find it surprising that the White House didn't ask. First of all, after all we've learned about the lies and duplicity of the FBI, who on earth would believe what they're saying now about COVID or anything else? Whatever else they're trying to pull, these claims about a lab leak are intended to legitimise after the fact the ruinous responses inflicted upon us. I know a lot of people are primarily focused on finding out what COVID-19 was, where it came from. I get that, and I understand their determination. For what it's worth, I don't believe there was a new disease. I think the whole thing was a hoax, a scam, an excuse to roll out the gene therapy, which they're still using and seem to have no intentions of abandoning, as well as the opportunity to transfer all that wealth and curtail all manner of freedoms. But to me, what matters much more is to see COVID-19, whatever it was, as yet another prop for the same old magic trick. And let's remember how influenza mysteriously disappeared almost without a trace during the COVID era. None of the usual flu deaths, all those deaths attributed to COVID instead. Never forget either that nonsense we were fed about how if you got hit by a bus within 28 days of testing positive for COVID, you were listed as a COVID death. That was the level of the insanity, and we're already in danger of forgetting. And let's remember too what real-world data said about the reality of 2020 when we were all being frightened to death about a so-called pandemic. Bear that testimony from Germany in mind when you remember what was done to us all in the name of COVID-19. The greatest transfer of wealth from poorer to richer in all of human history. Unprecedented restrictions on rights and freedoms. Earlier this month, outgoing US President Joe Biden extended for 4 more years the protection for big pharma giants Pfizer and Moderna against any legal action by those hurt or killed by the jabs. The rich got richer and will stay richer. Those killed or hurt or otherwise destroyed by actions taken by the insiders remain killed, hurt or redressed or destroyed and without redress. Over and over, we're played and fooled by those who will use anything and everything in the naked pursuit of total control over every aspect of our lives. Climate hoax, pandemic hoax. If you wonder how low they will go, how much harm they're prepared to do to get what they want, then the answer is, it seems pretty clear that insiders will do absolutely anything. World wars, global financial crashes, you name it. If authority says it, I shake my head in response. Climate crisis, preached by the guys in private jets and with beachfront mansions and ever-swelling bank accounts. Nah. Pandemic. Fear mongered by those whose mates made fortunes, all the while our freedoms were stripped from us and our voices silenced for telling the truth. Nah. I say again, none of us should be sidetracked or otherwise distracted by what we're shown on mainstream media and the rest, what we're invited to watch. Pay attention instead to what the authorities, the insiders, do in the name of making us safe. Pay attention to what we are told we must lose or surrender in the name of fixing the problem, defeating the threat. Because what we lose or surrender is gone for good, while those who already have it all get more. Thousands died on 9/11. That's a dreadful, inescapable fact. 6 weeks later, the US Congress passed the Patriot Act, vastly increasing government power to spy on its citizens with impunity. In other so-called liberal democracies around the world, basic democratic principles, civil liberties, freedom of speech, all were affected or eroded. Those changes, those impositions on freedom have remained in place ever since. The leash, once tightened, is never loosened. Once our rights are taken away, they don't come back. Also in the aftermath of 9/11 came the war on terror, which is still being fought. Millions of lives lost, trillions of dollars spent, chaos unleashed in one country after another. I said at the top that I've only been aware of the trick for a few years, but that I'm already exhausted by watching it over and over. The magician pulls a rabbit out of his top hat, or rather a pandemic or a war, and while we're looking the wrong way, we get our pockets picked. I say, new year, new outlook. Whatever happens next, whatever the crisis, the atrocity, the sudden emergence of a new disease, ask yourself what you're being told to surrender, to make it all go away.